Welcome to the Reason in Theology Show, everyone. Your host, Michael Lofton, on a Friday evening. I did not get a chance to prepare for this, as like many of our shows, it's impromptu. So I apologize if I don't have maybe quotes readily available. So I'm going to be doing this extemporaneously. Well, what are we doing here? Well, we are going to review a post by Dr. Taylor Marshall. Going to do a charitable and respectful critique of something that Dr. Marshall posted on his website per a request of actually multiple patrons. Multiple people sent this to me. And it seems like it's a follow-up post to the video he did previously that I already reviewed. So I guess you could call this a continuation of that review that I did. But I did note some extra stuff in here that he goes over that I didn't get the chance to review in the previous video. So we are going to go over this. Again, I'm going to offer a respectful and charitable critique. I get where Dr. Marshall is coming from. I've been there. I've been where he's at. I've had the same frustrations as he does. I still have some of the same frustrations he does. I understand the concerns that he's trying to fight against, liberalism in the church. I get it. Once more, I've been there. I still share a lot of his concerns. It's just that I would take a nuanced approach in responding to them. That's where I think I would really differ with Dr. Marshall is the reaction and the response. Although I would say some of the things that he's concerned about are probably not really major issues or issues at all. But let's dive into some specifics here. Let me pull up my screen and share it. This was a post made a few days ago. I don't see the date right up at the top, but it was released just a few days ago. 7 questions on Vatican II. This is on everybody's mind, right? I mean, Vatican II, a lot of people think that it's the source of all the problems in the post-conciliar era. And I understand why. And that's why we spend a lot of time addressing Vatican II and trying to balance out some of this overreactionary position that I see among people who want to be faithful Catholics. They want to be traditional Catholics. They want to be faithful to Christ and the tradition handed down from Christ and the apostles. But in the process, a lot of times they overreact. And by the way, I see you there in the chat. Michael, your disposition was a stone cold killer in your debate yesterday. Was it? I felt like I really went easy on him. Are you going to do a quick recap? Yes, I actually am. And it's not going to be a quick one, unfortunately. It's going to be a probably a couple hour video minimum. The reason why is Chris Date did not realize a lot of the implications of things that he said and things that I was trying to point out to him. Granted, I didn't have a whole lot of time, so I couldn't really, draw out all the conclusions. All I could try to do is set him up to where he points out the dots, and at the very end, I can maybe try to connect them and show them, which I tried to do. But again, you don't have a whole lot of time. 5-minute closing statement. What? I don't know how to take everything that I just heard in the cross-examination and summarize that. Not only that, but also the rebuttal period and the opening and try to connect all the dots in 5 minutes. Sorry, that's an impossibility. I did my best, but what I'm going to do is a follow-up show and show the problems and the implications and what he was arguing. I didn't think I was a stone cold killer. I thought that I was overly kind. There was one point where in his rebuttal, he said something like something along the lines that I was a piece of cake and he was just relieved that, he was able to maintain the thesis. Not only did he not maintain the thesis, but I don't really think I was a piece of cake. I think what it is, and I didn't say this because I was trying to be nice, but I don't think he realized and was following 90% of what I was saying. So yeah, in his mind, he's going to think this was a piece of cake because he's not following the vast majority of what I'm saying. So I'm going to do a post-debate review video and connect the dots and show the implications of not only what he was saying, but I was saying, and show that he was being utterly inconsistent, which Dr. White, Dr. James White, the Protestant, one of his mentors, as I understand it, or at least one of his heroes, Dr. White always notes inconsistency is a sign of a failed argument. He was extremely inconsistent because the very same standards that he used for the canon are the same standards that you would use for tradition and the magisterium. Okay, we'll talk more about that another time. Let's focus here in detail on Dr. Marshall's post. So let's get to it. 7 questions on Vatican II. Pope Francis recently said regarding Vatican II, if you do not follow the council or you interpret it in your own way as you wish, you are not with the church. Now, objectively speaking, what Pope Francis is saying here is true, that we aren't necessarily supposed to offer our own interpretation of a council. We are to understand the mind of the church, the mind of the council itself, the intention of the fathers at the council. So I would agree with what Pope Francis is saying here, objectively speaking. We need to seek the mind of the church and its understanding of a council, and especially the mind of the fathers at Vatican II. Now, I recognize that's going to be a little bit difficult because there were some opposing views at the Second Vatican Council. And Pope Benedict, of course, in his Christmas address, 2005, offers a very good hermeneutic. And by the way, that Christmas address is in the Acta Apostolica Sedis, which makes it magisterial, right? You might argue that it's not as authoritative as maybe something that would be in the AAS that was addressed to the Universal Church, because in this case it was addressed to a group of cardinals. I understand that, but it at the very least it's still authoritative, even if it's non-definitive. It's still authoritative. It still requires assent of intellect and will, unless you have just a really good reason to say that you're going to reserve assent here. Okay, let's move on. Here is the full quote in context. This is magisterium. The council is the magisterium of the church. Either you are with the church and therefore you follow the council, and if you do not follow the council or you interpret it in your own way as you wish, you are not with the church. In this respect, we have to be demanding, severe. No, the council is not subject to negotiation in order to have more of these. No, this is how it is with the council. And this problem that we are experiencing, this selectivity of the council, has been repeated throughout history with other councils. It gives me so much to think about a group of bishops that after Vatican I left, a group of lay people, other groups, to continue the true doctrine that was not that of Vatican I. We are the true Catholics. Today they ordain women. Which I thought was, wow, that's interesting that Pope Francis would note that. Had to throw that one out there. The most severe attitude to guard the faith without the magisterium of the church leads you to ruin, which I agree. Please, no concessions to those who try to present a catechesis that is not in accordance with the magisterium of the church. I agree with what he's saying in principle here. Does Pope Francis always model out what he's saying in the best way? Not necessarily. I don't think you have to believe that. I don't think you have to necessarily say that he's the best model of the advice he's giving. But I agree with what he's saying objectively. All right. So Dr. Marshall asks the following questions. I think that Dr. Marshall, again, respectfully should have asked these questions privately to various theologians who are experts in the magisterium. I could recommend some, but I'm sure he has access to plenty. So I don't know if this was the best thing to post publicly, because frankly, Dr. Marshall has a very large following of a lot of people who are confused. They're seeking answers. They're good people. They're trying to follow Christ, but they're so confused by the crisis that's going on in the church today. And so they're looking for answers. And they know that Dr. Marshall is sincere. He loves Christ. He wants to be obedient to Christ. He wants to be obedient to tradition and preserve that which has been handed down, all of which is great. They know that, so they look to Dr. Marshall for an answer. The problem is the message that he's putting out here is actually, in my opinion, harmful. I don't think he intended it to be harmful. I assume his intentions are good. I'm just talking objectively. What I see here is concerning, and I think it would have been better to ask these questions in private rather than to express them publicly. You know, Donum Veritatis talks about this, right? You know, a theologian who's wrestling with something that's taught by the magisterium, there's very specific rules that they're to follow, and I'm not sure if that is what is being followed. And I see Andres is asking in the chat, is this a Taylor Marshall bashing hour? Of course it's not. That's absolutely nonsense. Why would you even ask that? I already explicitly said I'm trying to do this very charitably and respectfully to Dr. Marshall, and that I appreciate where he's coming from, but I think that it is definitely concerning, some of the things that I'm seeing here. And again, he has a whole lot of people who are listening to what he is saying, and I think that the message that's being presented here is not helpful. All right, so the first question is, does Vatican II fall under extraordinary magisterium? I'll answer the question, but I don't think that this is necessarily the best way to ask the question or the best phraseology. When we talk about the extraordinary magisterium, I recognize that Mortalium Animos uses the term, so I recognize it's a valid term, and you know, it is getting at some legitimate concepts. But I don't think it's the best way to ask the question. But let me first answer it, and then I'll critique the question. Is Vatican II under the extraordinary magisterium? Yes, every ecumenical council is an extraordinary event. That's why we've only had 21 of them. So it falls under the extraordinary magisterium. However, just because it falls under the extraordinary magisterium does not mean that it necessarily teaches something definitively or infallibly. Not exactly the same thing, right? Not exactly the same. I know in a lot of people's minds, though, those are the same thing. It's not exactly the same thing. You could teach something infallibly in an extraordinary way. Yes. You could also teach something infallibly in an ordinary way. I think the better question would be, does Vatican II offer any definitive propositions? That would be a better question than asking, does it fall under the extraordinary magisterium? Now, I understand he gives some quotes later on. We're going to look at those. In fact, let's just do those now. Let me just look at the quotes while I'm going through each letter here, or each number here. In view of the pastoral nature of the council, these are the words of Pope Paul VI, it has avoided proclaiming in an extraordinary manner any dogma carrying the mark of infallibility. Now, I already showed the problem with what Dr. Marshall was doing with this text in the last video, but let me go ahead and emphasize it again. And you got it there in the chat. There you go, Hugh. Dogma, right? Dogma is the key word here. Yes, Vatican II did avoid using or proclaiming something in an extraordinary way that is dogmatic. Yes. That doesn't mean that it avoided proclaiming in an extraordinary manner any doctrine carrying the mark of infallibility. There's a difference. There's a huge difference. Dogma and doctrine are not the same thing. Dogma applies to primary objects of infallibility. Doctrine, technically speaking, applies to secondary objects of infallibility. So you could ask the question, did Vatican II teach anything in an extraordinary manner carrying the mark of infallibility that pertains to doctrine that is a secondary object of infallibility? And if you ask that question, great question. Yes, in fact, I believe it did. And quite a few theologians would argue it did. Again, I've thrown this out a million times. The sacramentality of the episcopate I would argue, was definitively taught here. And I would argue it was a secondary object of infallibility. Therefore, it falls under doctrine and not dogma. So what Paul VI is saying is true. And yet Vatican II is teaching something definitively that had not been taught previously in a definitive fashion. So I would say it proposed something definitively. Okay. So that's number one. Number two is, does Vatican II bear the mark of infallibility? Not the best question either. Not the best question. Because a better question would be, does it bear the mark of authoritativeness, right? Is it authoritative? You could ask, does it bear the mark of infallibility? And I would say, yeah, it did propose some things infallibly. Again, the sacramentality of the episcopate is the one I'm going to keep going to, although there are potential others as well. And I'm not just talking about things that it's repeated that were already taught infallibly. I'm talking about things that are newly proposed as in an infallible fashion. Okay. So to answer the question, I would say yes. But even if the answer is no, so what? We've had ecumenical councils that did not propose anything infallibly before. We've had that before. And you wouldn't say that they're not an ecumenical council, would you? No. So, irrelevant question, in my opinion. The better question is it authoritative? Did it teach authoritatively? And the answer there is absolutely, it did teach authoritatively, even if non-definitively in many cases. It's still authoritative. It still demands your assent of intellect and will for any proposition that it gives that is not contrary to any other proposition that's offered with a higher weight. And I would say that is the case. It's not, you got to show the burden of proof is on you. It's on you to show that Vatican II proposed something, even in a non-definitive fashion, that it proposed something that is contrary to something else that the magisterium had previously proposed that has a higher weight. You have to demonstrate that. You could demonstrate some cases where that's seemingly the case, but I think when you really dig deep and look further into it, it appears to be the case that there actually is no conflict. And in the same way, you would be charitable to Scripture, and you see two passages in Scripture that seem to have tension, and you wouldn't immediately say there's a contradiction here. You would try to use Augustine's principles that he gave in his book on Christian doctrine, or in his Enchiridion. You would take those principles and you would apply them to Scripture. Do the same thing here with the magisterium. Take those same principles. Try to be charitable in your interpretation. Try to see if there's ways to reconcile these things. And I'm confident in every case that I've seen, there is a resolution and there's really, truly no conflict. But even if there were, there are ways to deal with conflicts when it comes to the non-definitive teachings of the magisterium. And I've talked about that many, many times. So I don't think this is a very good question. Here's the expanded question. Well, I think he's actually quoting something here. Vatican II is not extraordinary magisterium. That's not true. We just showed that that's not true. In fact, there are quite a few theologians that would know, even though, I see you there in the chat, Kayla, even though Vatican II did not offer anything definitively that is dogmatic, doesn't make it an extraordinary event, right? Because again, we could show that it taught something in an extraordinary manner pertaining to doctrine, not dogma. So he jumps the gun, and what it is Dr. Marshall isn't familiar with these terms, and so he reads that and he just thinks, oh wow, Paul VI is just saying this thing's not infallible. It's not part of the extraordinary magisterium. That's not what Paul VI is saying. He's using very technical language. And if you know the language, you don't have an issue here. You won't have this conflict. But if you don't know the language, you're going to ask these kinds of questions. And it really tips your hand and shows that you don't know what you're engaging here. So it would have been better that he had maybe talked about this with somebody else privately and tried to understand what Paul VI was saying. Again, quite a few theologians, even in the pre-conciliar era, would note that every ecumenical council is an act of the extraordinary magisterium, regardless of whether it teaches anything definitively. Regardless, it could teach nothing. It could just get there and propose nothing but discipline. it would still be an extraordinary event. It still would be. So I think that he's just confusing terms, and it's leading to these questions. So he says Vatican II is not extraordinary magisterium. That's patently false. I don't agree with that. All right, he goes to quote, but one thing must be noted here, namely that the teaching authority of the church, even though not wishing to issue extraordinary, say it for me, dogmatic pronouncements, right? Pay attention to that. Don't just see extraordinary and just say, oh, there's nothing extraordinary here. Dogmatic has made thoroughly known its authoritative teaching on a number of questions. Did you catch that? Even if it doesn't offer something dogmatically, it has taught some things authoritatively. And you are bound to believe these things upon pain of mortal sin. Per the preconciliar manualists, consult the preconciliar manualists and ask what was the theological censor for denying something that was Catholic doctrine. And Catholic doctrine, as a theological note, pertain to non-definitive teachings of the magisterium, as Dr. King has demonstrated. Consult them, and they would tell you the theological censor is mortal sin, an error in faith. Well, not an error in faith, an error in Catholic doctrine, I believe. It was the actual theological censor. I'd have to go back and look at it, but I know it does identify it as an error, and I know the consequence would be mortal sin. Now, of course, with mortal sin, you have to have full knowledge, full consent of the will, things like that, right? So I'm not saying anybody's necessarily a mortal sin if they're saying that I don't assent to something taught by the Second Vatican Council, but they are in danger of mortal sin, is what I'm going to say. Okay. Has made thoroughly known its authoritative teaching on a number of questions which today weigh upon man's conscience and activity, descending, so to speak, into a dialogue with him, but ever preserving its own authority and force. It has spoken with the accommodating, friendly voice of pastoral charity, which I'm not going to say was evil. I don't think that the church, did anything evil by taking this approach. I don't think it was the best approach. I think that it turned out to be a failure, and it didn't turn out to be the right way to approach and engage society. So I don't necessarily think that this was the best way to handle the modern world. At the same time, I don't go and say that it's evil and sinful. No. It could still be in the realm of good, but it's not the best. All right. But the big point here is that what Paul VI is talking about is extraordinary dogmatic pronouncements. Okay. Not necessarily doctrinal pronouncements. So it doesn't logically follow from in either this quote or this other quote that Vatican II is not part of the extraordinary magisterium, or that it doesn't bear the mark of infallibility. Because again, you could teach something infallibly that is a secondary object of infallibility. That wouldn't be dogma, it would be doctrine. All right. If Latin is not used, does one not stand with the church? Again, I showed in Sacrosanctum Concilium, these two were problematic because the text itself allows for local territories with the approbation of the Holy See to determine how much Latin and stuff like that they're going to use. Do I think they chose the best thing? No, I don't. I think we need more Latin and more Gregorian chant in the Latin rite. I believe that. I don't think that they've done something that's evil. If all you have is the vernacular and no Gregorian chant, is the liturgy in and of itself, because of those two factors, sinful and evil? No, it's still in the realm of good. It might not be the best. I don't think it's the best. I think it would be better to preserve more Latin and Gregorian chant in the Latin rite. I don't have a problem with that. So I think that we can skip those two. All right. Here's the big ones. Must I believe Vatican II statement on Hindus? I guess he means the Vatican II statement. I don't. Must I believe Vatican II on Hindus? Well, frankly, these questions, if you want to criticize Vatican II, there's better criticisms available. I always like to say with some of my opponents, you want to criticize Catholicism? Here, let me help you out. I give you some better arguments. Yeah, I could help Dr. Marshall out and give him some better criticisms against the Second Vatican Council here. I don't think that these are really strong questions that should, these are really considerable issues. But I understand some people are still confused. Some people ask these questions and they're sincere. I understand that. And so I'm going to take them seriously and I'm going to address them because I realize some people are confused when it comes to the matter of Hindus, Buddhists, and other religions in the Second Vatican Council. And in fact, if y'all want, let me know in the chat. When I'm done with this review, if y'all want, I'll quickly do an exposition of Lumen Gentium 14 through 16. We can just go through it, read it line by line, and I'll work you through it and show you the Lumen Gentium 14 through 16 is not in conflict with the past. I could offer something a little bit more thoroughly with preparation, but I could do that, a basic exposition extemporaneously. If y'all are interested, just let me know in the chat. All right, let's look at Vatican II's statement on Hindus. He quotes it here, Hinduism. Thus, in Hinduism, men contemplate the divine mystery and express it through inexhaustible, abundant myths. You know what I'm reminded here? I'm reminded whenever atheists just pull whatever they think is in the Bible that is in conflict with something, maybe science or something like that. They'll just rip it out and they'll present it to you and say, "See, your Bible is in error." I kind of get the impression that that's what's going on here, but I don't know his intentions. I don't know his heart. It could be coming from a sincere place. And by the way, yeah, I see you there, Andrew, in the chat. Carl Warner, even though I know he was a Paridi there and worked on Lumen Gentium, I don't think he has the right understanding of Lumen Gentium. And you might say, well, he was a Paridi there. I mean, who are you to say otherwise? Because I'm going to interpret Lumen Gentium in light of the faith that has been handed down and in light of previous magisterial statements. And I don't think that Karl Rahner's understanding of Lumen Gentium was necessarily in line with those things. So that's why I would say that my interpretation that I would offer of Lumen Gentium would trump a guy who was even there at the Second Vatican Council working on this document. And of course, just because somebody works on a document doesn't necessarily mean that their understanding of it is authoritative. Anyways, all right, so on Hinduism. Thus, in Hinduism, men contemplate the divine mystery and express it through an inexhaustible abundance of myths. All right, I gather, I don't know this for a fact because he doesn't say, but I gather what he's concerned about is that it says in Hinduism, men contemplate the divine mystery. And he might see that as problematic, right? Because, I mean, how right? This confuses nature and grace. How are they contemplating the divine mystery? You have to have grace in order to be able to do that. I think that's probably where he's coming from. Didn't Dr. Marshall write his dissertation involving the topic of nature and grace? So, I mean, that's probably going to be the lens through which he reads everything because that's what he did his doctorate on. So he's probably concerned that this is, proposing a conflict there. I don't know how to take it seriously, though. Because if you just simply look at it, it's saying they contemplate the divine mystery. It doesn't say that they do it successfully. It doesn't say that they actually do so successfully and supernaturally. They're just basically, they're attempting to. That's their goal. Their goal is to contemplate the divine mystery. That's their intention. Their intention is to contemplate the divine mystery. Do they successfully achieve it? Lumen Gentium doesn't, I'm sorry, the text here doesn't say, and I believe he's quoting from Nostra Aetate. It doesn't say, right? It simply does not say. It doesn't say either way. you would need to interpret it in light of what the church has taught elsewhere, and that is that there is no salvific grace in a false religion, and that nobody is able to contemplate the divine mystery by nature. Okay, so I see a way to interpret this perfectly in line with what the church has always taught on nature and grace here. I don't see the conflict. And express it through an inexhaustible abundance of myths and through searching philosophical inquiry. They seek freedom from the anguish of our human condition, either through ascetical practices or profound meditation or flight to God with love and trust. It doesn't say that they are successful in this. That's their intention. That's what they're trying to do. So you see how this doesn't necessarily have to mean anything false? There's nothing necessarily heretical about what we just read. You now need to prove to me that that's actually what's being said, that something here is being proposed that is false. I'm not saying it. Maybe he's saying something that I don't. Unfortunately, he doesn't give us any commentary here. So if he has remaining concerns here, I'd be interested in hearing them. On Buddhism, must I believe Vatican II's statement on Buddhists? He goes on to quote, again, Buddhism in its various forms realizes the radical insufficiency of this changeable world. It teaches a way by which men in a devout and confident spirit may be able to acquire the state of perfection or perfect liberation, or attain by their own efforts or through higher help, supreme illumination. Yeah, he's probably concerned thinking, oh, this is confusing nature and grace, and saying that they actually acquire perfect liberation or attain it by their own efforts. Is that what it says, though? Does it actually say they successfully do it? Or is it just saying that that's what they're trying to do? That's their intention. That's their goal. That's their aim. That's what Buddhism is trying to do. That's its purpose. It doesn't say that they successfully do so. Could you criticize it and say, well, maybe they should have said that? Yeah, okay, great. Maybe they should have said that they don't successfully do so. Okay, fine. I agree with you. I think they should have made it abundantly clear and said that. But it doesn't take away from the fact that I can read this in a completely Orthodox fashion and not have a problem with it, and say that, yeah, that's what they're trying to do. That's what Buddhism's goal is, but they never actually reach it, because these things can only be reached by grace, which is merited from Christ. It's through Christ. It's never through a false religion, as Ronner would like to put it, for people who are invincibly ignorant. Yeah, but Ronner would say it's still from Christ. It's just it's being administered kind of like a sacrament through the false religion. And I just, no, you went too far. You lost me on that one, Ronner. You went way too far on that one. All right. So again, I don't have a problem with what Vatican II is saying here about Buddhism. And therefore, since you are to interpret this in a fashion that is in continuity with what the church has always taught, and I just showed you a way that you could do that, you are bound to assent to this with intellect and will at the very least. Lastly, other religions. Likewise, other religions found everywhere try to counter the restlessness of the human heart, each in its own manner, by proposing ways, comprising teachings, rules of life, and sacred rites. Again, that is what other religions try to do. Yes. Where's the problem? They are trying to do this in other religions. Are they successfully doing so? It doesn't say that they're successfully doing so. And you're not to assume that they're successfully doing so. It says that here, sacred rites. Does that mean that the church is calling their rites sacred? No. It's just saying that they are using what they think to be sacred rites. It doesn't say that we recognize these rites as sacred. It doesn't. You could read it in a heretical fashion, of course, but I just showed you a way to read it in a harmonious fashion with tradition. I could read Chalcedon in a heretical fashion, and some people did. Some people thought that Chalcedon was guilty of Nestorianism, right? This is why we had the Fifth Ecumenical Council, right? Can't you read things that have been taught by the magisterium, by popes, by councils in the first millennium, in the second millennium, in a heretical fashion? Of course you can. Is that the necessary interpretation? No. So I don't see the problem. Are you to assent to what it says in the correct way to understand it? Yes, you are. You're bound to do so. So there you go, Dr. Marshall. There's the answer to your 7 questions. I hope that you maybe reconsider these questions in the future. Now, I doubt Dr. Marshall will even watch this, but at least for people who are confused by what Dr. Marshall is saying, I hope that helps. Let's move on a little bit further because he says a couple other things that are troubling. No one can tell us the sacred deposit of faith given by our divine Lord Christ to St. Peter and the holy apostles contained these incorrect teachings about Hindus, Buddhists, and other religions. Okay. So what you have going on here, Dr. Marshall, a layman, just like myself, right? We're both laymen here. Dr. Marshall, a layman, no authoritative way to interpret the Second Vatican Council. Although you know who was authoritative in their interpretation of the Second Vatican Council? Pope Benedict XVI in his Christmas address in 2005, which excludes the idea that Vatican II is not in continuity with the past, and that is binding on your conscience. Okay. Dr. Marshall, as a layman, in a non-authoritative fashion, proclaims the Second Vatican Council as teaching things incorrectly, which is just a nice way to say false teachings, right? That's all he's saying is these are false teachings. Incorrect teachings is just a nice way to say Vatican II taught false teachings. Has the magisterium ever taught something false in a non-definitive fashion? I think yes. But I can only say that because the magisterium has judged those cases and told us otherwise. I would be much more hesitant to say that if the magisterium had not intervened and corrected those teachings. John the 22nd is the perfect example, right? He was corrected by his successor. He was corrected by himself, but not authoritatively. It was his successor, actually, who issued a bull authoritatively correcting what John the 22nd had taught concerning the beatific vision. Could we, prior to that authoritative intervention, recognize that John the 22nd was teaching something, false? Yes, we could. Yes, we could. In that case, it's blatant. In this case, it's not as clear cut. So I'd be very, very hesitant to ascribe any kind of false teachings to the magisterium. And here's the thing. If you've concluded that there is something that the magisterium has taught that is false, and the magisterium itself has not recognized that to be the case and corrected itself, I would argue you probably don't need to express that publicly. You probably need to make that known to the magisterium, to the teaching authorities, make your concerns known, but probably need to do that privately. I understand Canon 212 talks about the laity and the faithful have a right to express their concerns. I understand that. There's a difference between me expressing my concern about a teaching and how it can be in conformity with the magisterium in the past. There's a difference between that and me saying something the magisterium currently teaches is false. There's a difference, a fundamental difference there. And what he's doing here is saying the Magisterium here, the Second Vatican Council, has incorrect teachings. And I want you to think about the implications here. A council, 2,500 bishops, vast majority of them approved these teachings. That's a lot of bishops. And again, as Congar noted, it had all of the marks of an authoritative council, more than any other ecumenical council. It enjoyed the most marks of authenticity. You got a lot of bishops there teaching this in communion with the Pope solemnly ratifying these teachings. And then you have all of the bishops afterwards receiving this. And you might say, well, they're all a bunch of liberals. Yeah, that I get. But the problem is it's not analogous, for example, to heretical bishops who are rejecting, say, Nicaea in the days of Athanasius. So you can't point me to that. There's never been any case like this before if you were to maintain Dr. Marshall's position. No. Because those bishops were going against dogma, right? Homoousios, that's dogma. They were outright denying dogmas. Okay. The majority of the bishops aren't outright denying dogmas. Some of them do, which I think they need to be excommunicated. But the majority of the bishops are not denying dogmas. They are engaging in other problems. But again, not the same thing as what's going on with Athanasius. So yeah, Josh, I see you there in the chat. That come on, man. The truth is not equivalent to an opinion poll, even if it's 95-5. You're better than that. You haven't even listened to the rest of my argument. What are you talking about, Josh? Come on. Are you kidding me? You haven't even heard the rest of what I'm saying. I've never even said that this all boils down to an opinion poll. I clearly don't take that position. I think it would be uncharitable to interpret me in that fashion. No. Truth does not boil down to an opinion poll. Why am I bringing up the numbers? Because that does affect not only the reception of a teaching, but also the weight of a teaching. Okay. 2,500 bishops receiving a teaching and teaching something is higher in weight than 150 bishops. If all other things are equal, all other things being equal, I understand there's some variables in there that could, change that. I understand that. All other things being equal, you have two councils. One teaches proposition X, one teaches proposition not X. The X one is 50 bishops. The not X one is 2,000 bishops. I'm sorry, the 2,000 bishops outweigh the X bishops. That's one of the ways in which you weigh magisterial propositions, and that's not something I've made up. I have theologians who back me up on that. That's one of the principles in determining magisterial weight. So that is why I bring up numbers. They are important. They're not going to determine something definitively. You're not going to settle the debate definitively in all cases, because in many cases, things aren't always equal. All other things aren't always equal. So there are other factors to consider. Okay. You have 2,500 bishops accepting this. You have quite a few who aren't heretics, quite a few bishops who aren't heretics. They might not be the best bishops. They're not heretics, receiving these teachings over the course of 60 years. Is it? It's been a long time. Not analogous to the controversy with Arianism, which was a controversy over dogma. What dogmas is Vatican II denying? None. So you can't Can't compare it. Moreover, in the case of the Arian crisis, the Bishop of Rome was one of the main proponents of the truth. And one of the ways we could know that Athanasius and his perspective was right is because the Bishop of Rome taught what Athanasius was teaching. So look to the Bishop of Rome. Multiple bishops of Rome have consistently approved of the Second Vatican Council here. I understand there may be some problems with them, but there's also a difference between personal problems with that Pope and their authority as the Pope, which every traditional Catholic knows, right? I mean, you could be the worst sinner as a Pope and still proclaim something definitively, right? Yeah. So your authority, your teaching authority is one thing, your personal holiness and things like that is another. You might criticize some of these bishops and say that they're not good men. Okay. All right. What does that have to do with teaching authority? Nothing. Nothing. Has nothing to do with teaching authority. You need to show me why, according to the understanding, our understanding of the Magisterium, the Catholic understanding of the Magisterium, why the Second Vatican Council is wrong and I don't have to assent to it. You don't need to point me to these are bad people. We need to talk about, do they have the authority to teach what they're teaching? Think about it, though. Do you really think you're being consistent by being part of a church that for 60 or more years has erred and taught false teachings and has an actual ecumenical council that has false teachings? For this long, your ecumenical council is erring. Already you got a problem. The reception of it is entirely in error. Multiple bishops of Rome who've approved it are consistently in error. Might I submit to you, sir, if you actually believe that, why are you still Catholic? Your church is defectible. Go Orthodox. What are you still doing as a Catholic? Your church is defectible. This is the claim of the Orthodox. Why are you still Catholic if you actually believe this? Please, I want to see somebody who maintains this, Dr. Marshall. I want to see them sit down with a well-educated Orthodox and tell them with a straight face, yeah, we just had an ecumenical council that has false teachings. And, hey, for 60 years, the church has been infiltrated by modernism to the extent that it has consistently taught false teachings for 60 years. We've received false teachings for 60 years. All of our bishops have received these teachings for 60 years. Multiple popes have received these teachings for 60 years, and they're false. They're contrary to what Christ has handed down, the deposit of faith that has been handed down for 2,000 years. Please tell that to an Orthodox. Please say that to an Orthodox and just wait for their response. Just wait for the reaction. Come on. This is not only an untenable position, it's an absurd position that the church could consistently err. And in fact, I've already shown previously that position is excluded by Donum Veritatis, not only in teachings, but even in the prudential order. I showed that position is excluded. So anybody who's actually maintaining what is being said here is in disobedience to the teaching authority in Donum Veritatis, the teaching authority of the Pope, which is probably no surprise to somebody who advocates this anyway. I mean, they probably have no problem saying, yeah, I'm in disobedience to the Pope. Okay. They'll try to say, yes, I'm in disobedience to the Pope because I have obedience to Christ. But again, failing to understand that whenever the Pope teaches, a council teaches, they teach with the authority of Christ, and those things are generally protected even in their non-definitive teachings. They're not always protected in non-definitive teachings. There could be an error that creeps in and that does need to be corrected. but it would have been corrected already. The magisterium itself would have already corrected it by now, and it would not have been received and taught at this kind of level. That's just absurd. That's absurd. I could see a papal homily having, an error in it, but come on. He then goes on to say, we cannot rightly believe that our Lord Jesus Christ taught the above teachings to the apostles regarding these false religions. Again, outright saying the magisterium has taught falsely. Have y'all ever, well, in fact, I think I brought it up in a video, so y'all might be familiar with it, but y'all ever considered one of the general audiences of John Paul II, one of his catechetical general audiences, where he notes that even when the Pope is teaching outside of ex cathedra propositions, that he is guided by the Holy Spirit and protected by the Holy Spirit from making errors? I remember that. That is magisterial, by the way. How does that line up with what we're hearing here? How does what I showed y'all the other day from Donum Veritatis about the church being unable to consistently make errors in the prudential order, which would then also apply to teachings? How does that line up with what we're seeing here? And I could go on and on and on and show that this is not only wrong, it's in disobedience to quite a few magisterial teachings. And that's why I'm very concerned here. I say this charitably, I say it respectfully. I'm not judging any intentions. I'm not judging any kind of culpability on Dr. Marshall. I don't know those things. All I'm judging is what is being objectively said. And I'm saying what is being objectively said is in disobedience to the teaching authority that Christ has given to us. We need to be very reluctant to come to the conclusion that there has been an error in the magisterium and the teaching authority. It's possible. It's very rare. It's very unlikely. We should never be this cavalier with it. So that's my concern. Y'all know I've been sick for a few weeks here. I'm still trying to get over it. So I'll do the video on Lumen Gentium another time because my voice is killing me over here. So I hope this has been helpful, though. If y'all do have some questions, though, I'll take those for a few minutes. So go ahead and send me any kind of questions that you might have in the chat. Make sure to put it to @Reason and Theology, and that way I can pick it out. Patrick said, "Did Michael just die?" Yes, I did. Samrad asks, Michael, what do you say on Vigano's stance on Vatican II? Said to scrap it. Look, I've maintained that in the past. I would be reluctant to maintain that today, though. I don't think scrapping it is the best way to put it. I mean, how could we seriously tell the Orthodox to join us when we are scrapping ecumenical councils? Unless you mean that we're going to reform some of those things and overturn some of the prudential decisions. Yeah, that's fine. Absolutely. I think the magisterium can and should overturn some of the prudential decisions of the Second Vatican Council. I think it will one day. In that time, it is what it is. I'm not going to say these prudential decisions are consistently in error. There might be some errors in the prudential order here and there, but I'm not going to say it's consistently in error in the prudential order. That's against Donum Veritatis. It's against reason that the Holy Spirit would even allow such a thing. But again, that being said, just because I'm not going to say that there's consistent errors in the prudential order doesn't mean that it chose the best things prudentially. That doesn't necessarily follow either. A lot of these things could be overturned by the magisterium when it comes to the prudential order, and I think that it should. So, I mean, that's my opinion. That's my view. Let's see, smoked pork ribs. How would you respond to the Muslim claim that God becoming flesh and entering creation is contradictory to his omnipotence, such as a rock he can't lift? Right. I mean, the big thing here is we're not saying that he ceases to be God, and that which is divine becomes, let me rephrase, changes to created. That which is divine takes on, and let me be specific, the second person of the Trinity, who is divine, takes on human flesh. He takes on something to himself. He doesn't change, he takes on. That's how. So, I mean, he remains what he was prior to the incarnation. He has now taken on something to himself. Yeah, this is a good one. How do we respond to Protestant criticism of the tu quoque variety that magisterial teachings can be interpreted wrongly? Yeah, sure. Look, this comes up all the time, right? And these are questions I've asked myself. Here's the answer. Are there cases where two people might look at a magisterial proposition and come to different conclusions? Are there such cases? Yeah, that happens. In such cases, might it be hard to discern what then is the actual true interpretation? Yeah, in some cases, yeah. The magisterium is not always taught clearly. This does happen. What do we do? How does this not just kick the can one step further down the road, as Chris Date inaccurately put in our debate yesterday? And I just had to smile. I just smiled and nodded. Mm-hmm. Yeah. How is this not just kicking it down the road one further step? Here's how. Could we not go back to the magisterium, the living magisterium, the current magisterium, and ask for further clarification and even get a definitive ruling? Could we not? Yeah. Yeah, we could. Is that now then not fundamentally different than what Protestants are offering? Yeah, that's fundamentally different. If we can come to this authoritative teaching or this authoritative teaching body, and it can now definitively arbitrate between our understanding of a magisterial proposition, that's not kicking it one step further down the road. That's definitively settling this. It all hinges on the assertion that the teaching authority has that authority, right? I mean, we'd have to make the argument for that first. But once we've accepted that understanding, the teaching authority, then we could say, yes, we could come to the magisterium itself, and it could arbitrate between our understanding and give us a definitive ruling. At the very least, an authoritative ruling, if not definitive. There you go. There's the tu quoque argument and the refutation to it. It's actually kind of easy to address. And I'm not saying you're wrong for asking. No, it was a good question. I'm just saying that they think that they have us nailed when they ask us this, and it's not that difficult for us to address that. Let's see. Yeah, how would you reconcile John Paul's teaching on mutual submission of husband and wife with previous papal teachings that obedience is specifically proper to the wife's role? Right. I mean, look, two things I would say. Number one, didn't he say that in a book? I mean, what was it actually part of the magisterium? I know in the theology of the body, I think is when he says that. Please correct me if I'm wrong, classical theist. It's been a while since I've looked at it. Does he teach it in his magisterium, or was that a private teaching? Please clarify that for me. Let's go ahead and assume that it's part of his magisterium. I mean, there are texts in Ephesians that do talk about a mutual submission, but then there are texts in Ephesians that talk about a husband over his wife, right? So there is an aspect of mutual submission, but then there also is an aspect of authority of the husband over the wife. Both are there. At the very end of the day, we could say that if this is taught by his magisterium, and there is no way to reconcile it with Ephesians, we might be able to say, I'm not sure that this is true, and I'm reserving assent to this. I could maybe see somebody arguing that. That's fine. That's very different, however, than what Dr. Marshall is doing here, where he's ascribing false teachings to an ecumenical council made up of 2,500 bishops, received for 60 years, approved by multiple popes and numerous bishops afterwards. It's a little different. Let me see what else I can find here. Who would I say caused the post-Vatican II confusion? Who? Well, the who, I'm sure, is Satan, right? But I don't think that's what you're asking. I think that there are many factors that go into the confusion in the post-conciliar era. I don't think the Second Vatican Council did everything that it could have done to mitigate some of this confusion. I think it could have done some things better to mitigate the confusion. But 2020 is hindsight, right? I think it could have done some better things, but with or without it, I think we are going to have this confusion, even if we had no ecumenical council at all in the 60s. I think the bottom was going to fall out either way. It seemed that all the things were brewing even prior to that. What else do we have? Yeah. How do we respond to ratrads and to those rejecting the hermeneutic of continuity? It's a good question. I mean, look, traditional Catholics want to affirm the teaching authority of Christ and his magisterium, right? The teaching authority has looked at the Second Vatican Council and has ruled that the hermeneutic of continuity is the way to approach this thing, and that we ought not to appeal to a hermeneutic of rupture. Who's guilty of the hermeneutic of rupture? It's not just the liberals. Yeah, the liberals are definitely promoting the hermeneutic of rupture. Mm-hmm. Sure. Your Father James Martins. Yeah. But you know what? Radical traditionalists are also promoting the hermeneutic of rupture. They're two sides to the same coin. They're just conservative and liberal, but two sides to the same exact coin, rupture. And I say both of those need to be rejected. And we need to appeal the Christmas address by Pope Benedict XVI. Donum Veritatis, paragraph 24, section 3, that would exclude such an interpretation. And just reason alone would tell you that the magisterium could not fail this severely and still, and you couldn't posit that the magisterium has failed this severely and still tell me with a straight face that the Catholic Church is the church established by Christ. Please tell me, when I was Eastern Orthodox, why I would want to come back to Catholicism, right? Because I left for Eastern Orthodoxy after becoming Catholic for a few years. Please try to argue with me and tell me why I should come back to Rome, to a teaching authority that has consistently erred for 60 years. Please tell me why I should believe in your teaching authority. And I want to hear it with a straight face. Come on. We know by even reason, even if we don't have magisterial interventions telling us otherwise, we know just by reason that this is an untenable position, which is why anytime I see people with signs like this, I know you're going to go either Eastern Orthodox, they're going to go sedevacantist, they're going to go atheist. I mean, they're going to go, at some point, they're going to carry these things out to their logical conclusion, and they're going to go elsewhere. So I am trying to do my best to warn people here. Don't really buy into this hook, line, and sinker, the stuff that you're seeing here, because it will lead you to some very dangerous positions. Yeah, do you believe Mary is co-redemptrix? Yeah, in a qualified sense, of course, right? What do we mean by co-redemptrix? In the qualified sense, in the traditional sense that you would see in the fathers. Sure. Um, I think sometimes we go a little too far with our emphasis on this. I'm not saying in any kind of magisterial teachings. I'm just saying kind of in practice, in the same way that I would say, I believe everything that we say about the Virgin Mary is just sometimes I think that we go a little too far in our emphasis of the Virgin. And I love the Virgin. Don't get me wrong. I love the Virgin Mary. Um, I've said before, I'll punch somebody in the face if they insult the Virgin Mary in front of me. And I'm serious about that. Um, I venerate the Virgin Mary over any other saint. She's the highest of all God's creation. At the same time, I think sometimes we go a little too far in emphasizing the Virgin Mary and underemphasizing Christ. I understand the reasoning of some people behind it. You can never overemphasize Jesus's, mother, and whenever you emphasize her, you're emphasizing him. I understand, but I would point you to the fact that that's not been the disposition of the Christians for a very, very long time. So, you just don't see that in the first millennium, for example. So, I think sometimes it goes a little too far. That being said, I affirm all the dogmas and all the doctrines, and I do believe that co-redemptrix is true. We just need to properly understand it, and I think sometimes it is taken a little too far. The rest of the question is, if so, can it be found in the fathers? Yeah, there are some instances, and I'll need to get some examples. I don't have them offhand, but I know I was dealing with that a while back, and there are some examples in a qualified sense again. And should it be made a dogma? I don't think that it should be made a dogma. No, I don't think there's a need for it to be made a dogma. I am of the view that things probably should not be made dogmatic unless there's really a controversy requiring it. I understand not all dogmas were made that way. And yes, I affirm those dogmas. I'm just saying. Should it have been made dogmatic? I don't think so. Papal infallibility is an example. I accept the dogma. I think anybody who denies it is a heretic. Do I think that it should have made dogmatic? No. Was it definitively taught prior to Vatican I? Yeah, it was. So you would still have to have accepted it as definitive, but dogma's slightly different. Did you see Matt Frad's shout out on his show on top of Catholic YouTube shoot? Yeah. Somebody sent that to me. I sure did see that. I think Mauricio sent that to me. So I saw that. I really appreciate that. So shout out to Matt Frad too, and of course go check out his channel, Pints with Aquinas. If you're not subscribed there, go ahead and subscribe. Good stuff. I've been seeing some really good stuff coming out from him lately, and he had Eric on not long ago debating with Father, one of our other contributors here, Father Patrick. They had a debate on Eastern Orthodoxy and Catholicism. So good stuff. What else do we have here? My voice is starting to fail me, so we'll wrap it up. What is this? You should write an official letter of correction and send it formally to Dr. Taylor Marshall, as he never seems to respond to critique now, but dishes it out endlessly. I don't know. Maybe he does. I don't know if I can confirm that latter part, but no, I I don't think that Dr. Marshall will listen to anything that I had to say. When I had previously spoke to him on the issue of limbo, he didn't seem to really didn't really seem to see me as somebody to really take seriously, in my opinion. Maybe I misread him. Maybe that's not, he might tell you otherwise, but that was just, I kind of got the impression that he brushed me off. So maybe because I don't have the words doctor in front of me, I don't know what it was, but maybe I'm assuming too much. Hopefully, I'm just assuming too much, and that's not the case. And I'm willing to be corrected if he does see me as somebody to take seriously. But I didn't get the impression he did take me seriously on that issue. So I have no reason to believe that he would take me seriously on this issue. So, what are false Orthodox beliefs? Their denial of papal supremacy, their denial, and I recognize not all Orthodox deny filioque, but it's generally denied by many Orthodox, their denial of the filioque. If some of them misinformed Orthodox deny purgatory, that is a false belief. That's heresy. If they deny indulgences, that's heresy. There's quite a few, actually. They deny original sin, right? The Council of Trent. But I understand not all Orthodox have the same views here. Some affirm original sin, some deny it. So I'm only talking about those who deny. Those who deny the Immaculate Conception, again, not all deny the Immaculate Conception, but those Orthodox who do deny it, they are heretics. Are they material heretics? At the very least, yes. Are they formally in heresy? I can't judge that. I can't judge that. But usually what happens when you're in schism is that you end up in heresy as well. And yes, I am saying Eastern Orthodox are materially schismatic. I'm not saying every one of them is formally a schismatic. That's not what I'm saying. If I believed that, I wouldn't have Father Patrick on the show. I wouldn't have somebody who is a formal schismatic. In most cases, I probably wouldn't have them on the show. Not as a contributor, no. But somebody who is not, either they are not in submission to the Roman Pontiff, or their bishop is not in submission and communion with the Roman Pontiff, is technically in schism, no doubt. So the Orthodox would be in schism. They do make some of them, and in fact, I would say all Orthodox maintain at least one heresy, and that is a denial of the papacy. Actually, two: denial of papal supremacy and a denial of papal infallibility. So every Orthodox would at least be a material heretic in those two areas, and also material schismatic. So those are some examples that I could think of off the top of my head, Elijah. I hope that helps. See if there's anything else. Has anyone told you your teeth are really close together? Not saying it's bad, just an observation. I think it might be the camera. I mean, they are close, but I think it might look a little closer than it might be in reality. I don't know. They're not abnormally close. So yes, Lakutis, I did spend $5 to ask that. I love it. Thank you, Smoked Pork Ribs. I appreciate the super chats. What else do we have on here? Have you read the introduction to the Bible Testament by Brent Petrie? I have read some of his material, but not that specifically. But I do recommend everything I've seen so far has been good. So I would have no problem saying check out anything that he's written, even if I haven't seen it before. Good stuff. I have a couple of super chats. Are those the ones from Smoked Pork Ribs? Please let me know if I missed some. Caden, I agree with you. More money, more problem. Yep, I definitely agree with that sentiment there. A little bit of Bad Boy, Puff Daddy, and Mace and Biggie wisdom there for you. What's the best way to support you and your channel besides Patreon? Definitely subscribe. That's a big way. Watch the videos. That helps with when it comes to advertising. It's not a lot, but I mean, hey, it helps. So more you watch, the better it is, right? So that's besides Patreon. Not only subscribing, but also telling others to subscribe, making them aware of the show. So perhaps put it on your social media if you can, just to help get the word out about what we're doing. Because I mean, we still remain largely unknown, despite the fact that we've interviewed some of the greatest minds of our time right now. I mean, we've had cardinals, bishops, some of the greatest theologians that are alive on the show, and we still remain relatively unknown. So definitely help share on social media. What's this? Have a problem that right? Well, thank you for the $10 super chat. I'll definitely accept the problem of the money that you sent there on the super chat. It'll go to a very good end. I assure you. Y'all have seen a lot of upgrades here to the setup, and I intend to make more. I do also, while we're at it, talking about funding and things like that, I honestly intend one day for this to be a full-time show. When I can do this full-time, if the show could support me full-time, I intend to do it full-time and then offer multiple shows a day, not just the stuff that I do at 6 o'clock or something on the weekend, but that weekend shows and then several other shows during the day, perhaps a quick news show, stuff like that. I'd like to have, 3 shows a day on different things. Maybe one of them is analysis and commentary. One of them is news. One of them is an interview. So it does go towards that end, and it does help. And it also helps pay for the, equipment that we've been able to upgrade with. So I do appreciate that, smoked pork ribs. Let's see. Here's another one. Help keep Michael out of the workplace. So, Emmanuel, I guess you saw that old commercial. So what I did, honest, true story, I went into a supermarket because I don't work at a supermarket. But y'all can go and watch the video. I went into a supermarket and I videoed just, the aisle and people walking back and forth in the aisle. And I used that as a background. Then I used myself on a green screen and then talking to myself, on the green screen. So 2 of myself. That's how I ended up making that. And it was basically a commercial saying, help Michael get out of the workplace. So I can do this full time. And then, hey, if we can get, eventually, if I'm doing this full time, we can get some of the other co-hosts and contributors to where if they're willing to do it full time, that'd be even better. I would like to be able to have more than just YouTube. Maybe we could have an actual channel, an app, get on Roku, stuff like that. There's a lot of possibilities coming in the future. I don't intend to keep the show stagnant. It's going to continue to grow. So I appreciate the support. I think we had a couple other super chats. Let me see. Yeah. Thank you, Kayla. Full-time Michael. Right. And thank you, Andrew, for your super chat as well. I really appreciate that, y'all. Let me make sure I got to them all. I think that was it. I really appreciate that. It helps a lot. And again, if you can try to help spread the word on your social media, I would definitely appreciate it. What do I do for work? I work, believe it or not, as an insurance trainer. So something has absolutely nothing to do with what I do here on this show. I teach insurance. I'm licensed to sell health insurance as well, although I don't. But I train people on health insurance and all that stuff, Medicare, Obamacare, and then private commercial plans, stuff like that. So it's a good job, but it's definitely not what I'm designed to do. I think I'm more designed to do teaching theology rather than teaching health insurance. So maybe one day that'll change. I hope there might be some opportunities for me to do some teaching at the seminary level here pretty soon. I might be able to make an announcement there. Part-time adjunct, we'll see, God willing. Hopefully one day I'll be able to do that in the channel. So I saw that. I feel you. I see. I've seen what is required for Hipaa compliance. Yeah. Oh, believe me, I can talk about the Hipaa laws all day long, endlessly, all about Hipaa. Yeah. So Let me make sure I didn't miss anything else. I think I got that one from Will. What do you do for work? Insurance for your soul. All right, yeah. There you go. That's a way to tie it in. What's funny is here, I'll tell y'all something. Generally, my classes on health insurance, I'll sneak in a little bit of philosophy and history every now and then into what I'm teaching, and they generally tend to find it fascinating. But they always ask, "Why are you here?" I mean, you know way too much to be here teaching insurance. Why are you talking about translating Egyptian hieroglyphs and you work here? So yeah. Somebody asks, is it car insurance? No, no, it's health. Although I've also been licensed for life and accident as well, but mostly just health, which I had to go and get relicensed again. And if you're in insurance, you know that's torture. I had to go through all that. So never let your license lapse. Yeah, I should get a sponsor. I agree with you. Why am I not Orthodox anymore? Boy, I wish my voice was working a little bit better so I could go on at length here. Big reason is ultimately, at the end of the day, the papacy is the reason why I just felt I could no longer remain Orthodox in good conscience. I love Eastern Orthodox. I love Eastern Orthodoxy. There's still some things that I think the Eastern Orthodox are doing better than us generally as Catholics. But at the end of the day, I have to ask what's true, not what do I like, what are my personal preferences, what am I more disposed towards, what makes me feel better. Those are all nice, but at the end of the day, truth isn't determined by those things, right? I might not feel good about truth, right? I might not be disposed to truth. None of those things are indicators necessarily for truth. So I had to ask, is the papacy objectively true? Did Christ objectively establish the papacy? Is it of divine institution that endures unto the present in the successor of the Bishop of Rome? I had to come to the conclusion, yeah, that is taught in the first millennium. I do think it is the view that wins out in the first millennium. I also think it makes more sense. So that's the big reason. If you believe that, and you remain outside of the Catholic Church, if you actually believe the Catholic Church was established by Christ and you remain formally outside of it, you're in serious trouble, objectively. I'm not saying subjectively and culpability and all that. I'm just saying, objectively speaking, you're in a very dangerous situation because, as Vatican II puts it, those, according to Lumen Gentium, those who fail to enter or remain within the Catholic Church, having known that it was established by Christ, can't be saved. And those words just continued. Vatican II's words and its warning there continue to go on in my mind. Vatican II's warning that I have to be reconciled to Rome really convinced me. Now, I'm not saying it convinced me of the papacy. It convinced me that since I really do believe it was established by Christ, I have to come back. I have to be reconciled. So that's why. Michael looks like he could be on Ice Road Truckers. I've never seen Ice Road Truckers, so I don't know if I can verify that. I'll take your word for it, though. Do you think communion on the tongue should be preferred over the hand? I do. What about the Latin Mass over the Novus Ordo? The Latin Mass over the Novus Ordo in the majority of parishes? Latin Mass any day. But Latin Mass over Novus Ordo done right? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. It'd be a pretty tough call at that point. But if you're just asking me about the Latin Mass over the majority of Novus Orders, obviously I'm going with the Latin Mass. And if you're limiting me to on the tongue or on over the hand, I would say on the tongue. Those aren't the only two ways to receive communion, however. Do I think that the Pentecostal charismatic movement is a sort of revival of the Montanist heresy? Yeah, I mean, look, I remember John MacArthur quoting from Eusebius, where Montanists would fall on the ground and shake and convulse and speak, all this gibberish and everything, and likening that to the charismatic movement. And is there some truth to that? Yeah, I think there's some truth to that. That doesn't mean that all instances of what we would call, something like a charismatic event is evil. No, there could be some instances that are from the Holy Spirit. It's just that I think the majority of what we see called the charismatic movement is not from God. The majority of what we see is probably not from God. It's either man or it's evil. That is not to say there are not genuine acts, charismatic acts of the Holy Spirit. I mean, you even see that with Padre Pio and some of the saints. There are genuine acts. What else do we have? I receive on tongue, lying prostrate, arms at my side. I've never seen anybody do that. I've seen lying prostrated on your side. I've just never seen anybody doing that with receiving communion. Communion spoon. Yeah, I mean that's one way, right? I mean it's not the ancient way. Communion on the tongue and the communion spoon are around the same time. Communion in the hand is older. Bring Ratzinger on. Right, that'll be the day. We might be able to bring some people on who know Ratzinger, but not Ratzinger himself. Pope Benedict Emeritus, he's not coming on RNT. I don't think. He's welcome on, but I don't think we would be able to pull that one off. So, let's see if there's anything else. Can I donate by sending you bars of gold via mail to avoid taxes? Yes. Where did I get that ring that I'm wearing? Yeah, the Jerusalem cross ring. Yeah. I think it was Amazon. Can I get Jesse Romero on? In fact, I'd love to have Jesse Romero on, because from what I saw, they had a video where they were going over exorcism or something. And they were talking to somebody who was struggling with evil. And I really appreciated their advice to that person. And I felt like these are men after my own heart. I would be honored to have them on. So yeah, I definitely would like to do that. Wait until I do my debate review, Hercule. Great debate. The debate got bad when your opponent said God delights in disunity. And then he said that I misrepresented him when I just pointed that out. I don't know how I misrepresented him, but okay. Yeah, I thought that was absurd. And I was trying to be as respectful as possible, but that's a ridiculous proposition that he actually made there. And it was in the context of fundamental doctrine. So don't tell me I misrepresented you. How did I misrepresent you? Do I think Occam is responsible for all of today's modern problems? Not all of today's modern problems. No. But Occam definitely did have some issues that led to some problems with Luther, it would seem. Let's see. What else? Show us your tattoos. Yeah, no. Some people are really offended by my tattoos. I've had quite a few traditionalists. They got really upset because in some of my shows, I might have short sleeves or something like that, and they get really upset when some of my tattoos are showing. So, any updates on Jerry Madadix? No, he was supposed to come on, and then I think he got sick, and no update since then. looking to see. Yeah. What's your opinion on the Holy Father's social encyclicals like Laudato Si, Fratelli Tutti within the context of the wider tradition of Catholic social teaching? Here's my opinion. I haven't read them, and I'm not going to read them. I'm not required to read them. You don't have to read everything the Pope says. If you are going to teach on matters of social doctrine, you ought to read them, and you ought to make sure that you're informed. But I generally don't teach anything on Catholic social teaching, so I don't have any intentions of reading it anytime soon, if ever. So I might read them just so that I can answer questions like this. But I haven't had a need to read them, and so I haven't. So I've seen snippets here and there, but that's not the same thing as actually reading. I do have copies of Laudato Si over there. I mean, I do have some of these things. It's just I generally don't read a whole lot of them. The vast majority of Christians throughout history didn't read everything that the Pope said. In fact, a lot of them didn't even know who the Pope was. You have bishops writing to other bishops saying, hey, tell me who the Pope's name is so I can commemorate him in the liturgy. They didn't even know who it was. There are some advantages to having a lot of papal teachings, as we've seen in the last couple hundred years. There's also some disadvantages there. Let's see. Yeah, which Protestant authors were most pivotal in me coming to Catholicism? A lot of the Federal Visionists, believe it or not. Definitely the Federal Visionists. If Pope Francis gets killed by a jihadist, would he be considered a martyr in the Catholic Church? Not necessarily. I mean, you have to, just because you're a Christian, you get killed doesn't make you a martyr. What makes you a martyr is you dying for the faith. So if Pope Francis were to die for the faith, that would make him a martyr, yes. And of course, I hope that doesn't happen, right? I mean, we always want mercy, and we want God to preserve our leaders, and God to help make them wise decisions, right? Could I go on Matt Friend? Sure, I'd be willing to. Messages keep getting deleted. I haven't seen any of your messages getting deleted. I don't know what's going on there. Last one here. I think someone will eventually take that clip of you saying I generally don't read New Papal and cut it to make it I generally don't read. I read a lot. I do read a lot. I generally don't read a whole lot of papal teachings, unless it's necessary to something that I'm going to be teaching or writing on. Then I do my best to try to make myself informed. But I don't generally sit down for personal devotion and read modern papal encyclicals or something like that. Although I've read quite a few, don't get me wrong, I've read a whole lot. I am right now focusing on the Acts of the Council of Constantinople and a couple dissertations, and then my own dissertation. So anyways, we'll go ahead and end it there. I appreciate y'all's questions and participation there in the chat. Definitely help share this on your social media, help get the word out, because I think that there's a lot of people who are confused by Vatican II, and they think that they are just to throw out the whole thing. And so they end up, falling off the deep end on that side. I think it's important for us to have a balanced approach when it comes to Vatican II. We don't have to just say everything was perfect. We don't even have to say everything was done the best prudentially. But we also, at the same time, don't need to fall off the other side and just say that there's false teachings here and blah, blah, blah. So, again, try to help share this on your social media. Don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Till next time. God bless.